I would have sworn we posted some video on the Tiger Mountain Report Twitter account, and that's for Gardea, who out of Mexico, who last year was all over the Tiger system. He just turned 24, and he's made an appearance in spring training so far. But last year, technically pitched at all three. He pitched at three different levels. I mean, he only pitched an inning in Toledo, and we talked about him on the podcast. I believe, yeah, right when he got called up, and he's an interesting arm in the sense that he doesn't, in terms of like just his numbers don't stand out to you, and you look at his numbers in Erie. Okay, well, it's got a K point or strike K per nine of only 6. Really speaking, his white, he had really impressive numbers at West Michigan, but the Tigers seem to like him if they're putting him out there that early. And I think that the back end of the Seawolves bullpen this year is going to have a completely different look, comparatively speaking. You saw White sort of probably starting the season Toledo, and Gardea, I think, could be this is an opportunity for him in Erie to part of a revamped bullpen to stand out.
Yeah, he's we've seen him in spring because he has a big league breaking ball. It is a legitimate above average slider, if you want to call it that, and a decent low 90s sinker. It so he can get outs. We saw that he ran into some trouble in Double A with a little bit more patient hitters and guys waiting on him to throw something else. But yeah, it's just one of those things where a guy has a big league pitch and you try to figure out how to make everything else work. like yeah, so you can see it. There's the breaking ball right there. That's a legitimate above average breaking ball. But when guys get your scouting report right and they know to look for that, and you don't have much else. I mean, the sinker's fine, but it's not going to miss bats. And he doesn't really have a third pitch, from what I can tell. He might have a four seamer. So the ceiling is a little bit um, lower there. But if you find a third pitch, if they get him a more consistent four seamer, or they get him a curve or a changeup, then yeah, you can keep hitters off that breaking ball, and you can use that as your finishing pitch, and you can pitch late innings all throughout the minors. And I think it wouldn't shock me at all if they do that with him this year.
Yeah, because I think he, in terms of sequencing and going out there and really kind of having the idea of what he's doing out there, I think despite the numbers in Erie, I thought he was pitching better towards the end of the season for the Seawolves. But yeah, if you're not gonna have a second pitch as a reliever, you're kind of screwed. But well, you're not kind of screwed. You are screwed. Let's face it. But no, I honestly, the reason why I thought he had some big league potential is A, because of that slider you mentioned, and also B, it just you saw him like just yes how they used him last year as an Oregon. It's not very. I mean, for a point of reference, he's been with the Tigers in their system since 2018, and he's kind of just I don't know. He just really didn't. It was kind of on the radar. Wasn't really. I mean, he was. I don't know. To just say he was there. I mean, he had good numbers in Lakeland in short period of time, but then last year he just suddenly it just like that. So that's why I always kind of intrigued because I remember the one thing we saw in West Michigan. It was just who's it? Who is this guy?
Yeah, I mean, we were intrigued because of yeah, I thought you. I mean, I thought you wrote an article about him. I remember we were talking about him with you. We were
Yeah,
in a hotel in Erie. We are like, oh, what are we going to say about this dude? But yeah, I think, and honestly, there are some guys who make it work with one pitch if it's good enough and you can tunnel it enough with the fastball. Like we were talking, the Tigers brought in Matt Whistler this year. He was 90% sliders. I don't know if Gardea is going to be that sort of pitcher, but it's a good enough pitch to get him to AAA and to survive up there. And sometimes you can just throw the guys in the water and let them figure it out. And so it wouldn't shock me if he's up in the big leagues one day at all, and relatively soon, right? Like, we kind of thought Brendan White was just a slider pitcher, and then he got another tick on his fastball, and next thing you know, he's on the 40-man roster. So yeah, it's not a super far distance for a guy like Gardea to make the big leagues. The other pitcher that I wanted to bring up, and this might be cheating a little bit for picking a breakout guy since he hasn't actually pitched in pro ball, but I wanted to talk about Joe Adametz, who was Detroit's 14th round pick last year out of Liberty. 14th rounder, probably not going to set the world on fire, but He is 6'5" and 190 pounds. So you think like maybe you could squeeze out a little more velo there if he puts on some weight. And you know what teams are doing with you know pitchers now out of college, they can add 3 miles an hour like nothing. It seems like so. That's something to keep in mind. And he's mostly like a 90-91 guy, but he will bump a 93 or 94. But from the video I saw, he seems to have a pretty good changeup, and his stats and the scouting reports back up that he throws a lot of strikes. And he missed 2021 with Tommy John surgery and came right back and was just pounding the strike zone for Liberty. And one thing I know about baseball history, particularly in the Tigers, is when you have a polished lefty college pitcher who has a good changeup pitching in the low minors, they just destroy hitters. This just going back 20 plus years. John Connolly had like a 1.4 ERA in West Michigan. John Kibler, Dwayne Belo, Charlie Furbush, just all these lefties who will, you know, these young hitters don't know what to do with a pitcher who can spot a changeup, a lefty who can spot a changeup away from them. And so it wouldn't shock me at all if Joe Adametz just puts up some like comical numbers next year in Lakeland and or West Michigan. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a great prospect, but I this is kind of like if there was a Tigers fantasy minor league, I would say, hey, yeah, grab him. He's probably a good source of strikeouts and low ERA.
That's funny too because the what I was thinking about was that lefty Atlantic. I've always referred to that one that can throw a changeup. I think it was a former U of M pitcher. I'm pretty sure. I can't remember now, but either way, no. And looking at his stuff, although the reason why you don't have any video of him right now, because there's just you can look on Twitter and find some stuff. Yeah, a lot of his stuff is move. It has all this stuff has some really good late break movement to it, and there was a lot of scouts early on hand on him at Liberty games, and so I think that it does fly well for the Tigers, who really traditionally speaking, as you mentioned with the lefties. But again, even with the new kind of process, it seems like they'll figure out one thing and go, okay, you're going to do that one thing, pitch very well.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, from the video I saw, it looked like he had like a parachute changeup, like a changeup that's going to be a real problem for hitters. So I could, yeah, I picture him putting up some pretty good stats next year. But you never know; like he might just show up and get bombed. I mean, there's got to be a reason he lasted the 14th round, right? Although Bo Brisky and Garrett Hill lasted to the mid 20s, and they ended up working out to be big leaguers. So I don't know. He's just an interesting name. I wanted to talk about Dylan Smith. I think Dylan Smith is going to have a nice breakout season, but I wanted to give people kind of a more of an obscure name just for fun.
So another arm that I wanted to talk about was a guy that we saw last year. I saw him at Lakeland. I also saw him at West Michigan. So, and I got a chance to saw him at two different levels, which was nice to see the kind of progression because at the time I first saw him, I didn't think much of it, but I thought that based off and this would be Jack Anderson, by the way. Anderson, when I saw him in Lakeland, I think it was like a game where there was a lot of walks, and he was one of the few pitchers that came in was pretty effective. And then the bullpen last year for Lakeland early on was kind of, I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of brutal. But Anderson stood out, Florida State grad, and I think to me, what I like about him, he's got a little bit of deception on his delivery because you notice on his extension, the last minute you can see it, but he throws pretty much throws a changeup fastball, I think a slider. I can't remember on that, but no, I like Anderson a lot. I think he got some time in the Arizona Fall League, which is something that we easily forget about. But I don't know, Chris. I think this is another product of the Tigers finding something that could be useful for him. And I think he probably start the season. I think it might be a good chance he might start the season in Erie.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me. Anytime somebody goes to the AFL, you think that Double A is a possibility. He's kind of you think he's like going to follow in the footsteps of Drew Carlton as kind of this later round Florida State reliever who doesn't necessarily have, he doesn't have explosive stuff, but it's one of those things now where we know or teams know enough about the way pitching works and the way pitchers react that you can get a guy who's throwing low 90s if you've got some deception, as he clearly does, and maybe you got a little ride and the fastball has a good shape. That's the same sort of thing we see with Aaron Haas, who's another reliever, and you get a little spin. So yeah, I think he's gonna stick in the bullpen for the most part, but there might be enough there for him to, like you said, this is kind of like an ideal guy who maybe never shows up on a prospect list, but one day he's in the big leagues because he just keeps getting outs. And yeah, that's a 92-mile-an-hour fastball up in the zone, and the hitter couldn't catch up with it. So I think there's some characteristics to the fastball that are worthy of you know praise.
Yeah, and his mechanics too. What I like about his mechanics are very repeatable, and he doesn't really, as far as like you look at the windup, I would expect him to open up a little bit more. But I mean, I'm again
That
just
was
from
a
my
strike.
yeah, that was a strike. There you go.
Yeah.
And then I know that's what I'm. The mechanics are very repeatable, consistent, and that's something that I don't know that stood out to me last year when we saw him at West Michigan. Also because he has a striking red beard too. It's kind of
Yeah.
there's a lot of cool things you could do with that. But no, I like Jack Anderson a lot, and hopefully we get a chance to talk to him this year. As let's see, that was another good pitch there. It's just to me, I think he is an example of taking the most of what he has and playing up to it. And I think the Tigers, as I mentioned before, could probably end up using him. And here he is at West Michigan. I just want to see there like that. That was that's some of his stuff has got some good tailing action. His fastball, slider.
Yeah, and I mean, it looks like the fastball and the slider. It's kind of a short slider, but it looks like it tunnels pretty well with the fastball. Like it looks like a fastball up until the end. And that
That's
was a
good.
sharper one right there.
Yeah.
That's a back foot slider. So you see him being able to alter the shape of the slider and yeah, just some advanced feel for pitching there. And he was a reliable member of the Whitecaps bullpen down the stretch. So it wouldn't. Yeah, I would expect him to be in Erie to begin the year, honestly.
Yeah, and I think he's a little bit more advanced than that. And I think there's going to be some growing pains, obviously, if when he starts the season in Erie, because Erie is a completely different beast altogether. But that's another guy who I think is going to. And is he going to be up a top 100 list? No, but I think he's going to be a guy you should take a look for the Tigers. Last year, he finished. I mean, in terms of salt, his numbers in Lakeland, or excuse me, in West Michigan rather, it doesn't stand out. 1.42 WHIP, but 22 strikeouts in 21 innings, and he just had 6 walks. So that's where I mean, in terms of getting hit, sometimes sometimes really good in outing, sometimes not. But I think once he gets the consistency, I don't really. I take the Salt River, excuse me, the Salt River experience is kind of like, well, you're going up against really high caliber talent and just finding his footing.
Yeah, that's Arizona is no place to pitch. You're going, like you said, you're mostly against hitters who are in Double A or above. They're getting ready to go to the big leagues, and it's a tough place to pitch for anybody. It's particularly at the end of your first pro season. And I'm kicking myself. I did not put him. I thought for some reason, I thought I had him later in the list. I don't have him on the. We just put up a list of some more interesting minor leaguers in the system who didn't make our top 25 prospect list, and I didn't have Jack Anderson on there, and I'll have to add him for the next list.